Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea reports new cases of COVID-19 back in the 400s, and also the first cluster of cases of the virus's variants from South Africa and Britain. President Moon Jaein goes to Incheon International Airport to inspect rehearsal drills for the distribution and administering of vaccines. Agencies across the government will be mobilizing to make sure the process goes off without a hitch. And Bloomberg ranks South Korea #1 in the world in terms of innovation, looking at areas like R&D spending, manufacturing capabilities, and the use of technology in the public sector. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thanks for tuning in to Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. South Korea has reported for the first time cluster cases of the coronavirus variants. Until now, the variants had been found only in people arriving from abroad. There were 5 cases of the variants, and the number of cases reported Wednesday in total was back in the 400s. Kim Sung-min reports.
South Korea on Wednesday reported its first cluster infection cases of the COVID-19 variants, which were domestically transmitted. An analysis of 27 cases of COVID-19 since Monday found that 4 patients had the British variant and 1 patient had the South African variant of the virus. The government is on high alert as these 5 cases all stemmed from the local community. The 4 cases of the UK variant are part of a cluster infection of 38 cases across the south of the country, which can be linked to relatives of a person who was self-quarantining in Gyeongsangnam-do province after arriving from the United Arab Emirates. The health authorities are concerned that other patients in the cluster infection could also have the variant. The total number of COVID-19 variant cases recorded in South Korea now stands at 39, of which 27 are the British variant. This comes as the country's daily COVID-19 tally went back above 400 for the first time in 4 days, with 467 new cases on Wednesday. Of those, 433 were locally transmitted and 34 were from overseas. Recent infections remain concentrated in the Greater Seoul area, with the capital reporting the most at 184, followed by Gyeonggi-do province with 107 and 18 in Incheon. Most regions outside of the capital area reported fewer than 20 cases each. Cluster infections continue to stem from offices, hospitals, and gatherings across the country. While there are growing calls for eased virus restrictions during the Lunar New Year holidays next week, health authorities remain cautious as the number of cases with unclear transmission routes still hovers in the 20% range. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
And with South Korea expected to start administering vaccines later this month, President Moon Jae-in made an on-site inspection of the preparations underway for vaccine delivery and distribution. He called for the utmost care to be taken because of the vaccine's sensitivity to temperature and called on officials to prepare for all possible variables. Kim Min-ji has more.
President Moon Jae-in went to Incheon International Airport on Wednesday to inspect preparations for the transport, storage, and distribution of COVID-19 vaccines, with inoculations due to start this month. He visited Korean Air's cargo terminal, where rehearsal drills have been underway this week for vaccine delivery and distribution. There, President Moon was briefed on the preparations and inspected the process.
오늘 이게 보고를 들어보니 이렇게 화이자 백신이 당장 들어온다 하더라도 요 수송 보관 유통 그 계획에 좀 빈틈없이 잘 돼 있는 것 같은데 이제 그 부분이 정말로 좀 차질 없이 시행될 수 있도록 모의 훈련을 좀 철저히 해주시고 그래서 실제 이제 화이자 백신이 들어오고 난 이후에도 이 백신의 수송, 보관, 유통 전 과정에 국민들께서 염려하는 일이 전혀 없도록 그렇게 좀 대비를 잘해 주시기 바랍니다.
The drills, which began Monday for a 3-day run, involved the military, police, the Transportation Ministry, the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency, and the Korea Customs Service. Due to arrive later this month, the first vaccines will be those made by Pfizer. From the airport, they'll be transferred to a logistics center in Pyeongtaek in Gyeonggi-do province and then delivered to the National Medical Center in Seoul.
We are planning to deploy the best pilots and vaccine-related personnel and train them. And it's important to maintain the cold chain systems, so we will prepare necessary personnel and equipment for vaccine transportation more than an hour before the plane arrives.
During transportation, the military and police will accompany the refrigerated trucks in case of terror attacks, car accidents, breakdowns, or fires along the way. The locations and temperatures of the vehicles carrying the vaccines will also be monitored in real time.
We'll be managing the overall movement of trucks from the airport to the logistics center. Once they arrive, we'll inspect the warehousing and step up the guard. We're also preparing for any possible emergency.
Once they're at the logistics center, the vaccines will be checked for any external abnormalities and will be stored in the cold chain facility at the appropriate temperature. The Pfizer vaccines, for example, need to be stored at below -70 degrees Celsius. The vaccines will later be delivered to medical facilities and vaccination centers. President Moon encouraged the officials and asked for utmost care, stressing the importance of close cooperation across all agencies as well as the private sector. Moon Jaein, Arirang News.
In other news, the military of Myanmar, which has taken control of the country in what's being called a coup, has released about 400 people it had detained, including some former ruling party lawmakers, and it's ordered them to go home. Kyodo News cites a lawmaker from Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy as saying that senior officials, including the leader herself, remain under house arrest. On Tuesday, the military established a decision-making body to oversee what it said would be a one-year state of emergency. The military disputes the results of the November general election that Aung San Suu Kyi's party won by a landslide. South Korea has been ranked #1 by Bloomberg on its list of the world's 60 most innovative economies. A major factor is R&D spending, and another, the degree to which the public sector has adopted advanced technology. Ji-young reports.
South Korea has topped the list of the world's 60 most innovative economies. The country scored 90.49 out of 100 to regain the crown in this year's Bloomberg Innovation Index published on Wednesday after coming second last year. It was followed by Singapore and Switzerland, both also moving up one spot from last year. The US ranked 11th. Japan and China were 12th and 16th, respectively. Bloomberg said its rankings show government's work to contain the virus and the level of digital infrastructure. One expert says South Korea's return to first place is largely thanks to a strong performance in R&D and manufacturing.
The South Korean government invests heavily in R&D compared to other countries. Last year, about 4% of the government's budget was invested in R&D, which is very high.
He also says R&D is essential to high-tech companies. The country's largest tech firm Samsung Electronics invests around $18 billion every year in R&D, one of the largest amounts of any company. The index has 7 equally weighted metrics examining various criteria, including R&D spending, manufacturing capability, and the amount of high-tech public firms. But the expert says South Korea has very low productivity compared to the amount invested and adds that government regulations have to be loosened in order to improve productivity. South Korea's government this year plans to invest around $30 billion in the digital and Green New Deal projects for the post-COVID-19 world. It also plans to invest in the so-called Big Three industries, including future cars, biohealth, and system semiconductors. Ji-young, Arirang News.
South Korea has completed negotiations on a free trade deal with Cambodia, the fourth country with which it'll have an FTA in Southeast Asia. The deal was declared Wednesday in a virtual meeting between South Korea's Trade Minister Yoo Myung-hee and her Cambodian counterpart Pan Sorasak. There'll be a signing ceremony at some point in the future. South Korea's main exports to Cambodia include food, beverages, and cargo trucks, while it imports Cambodian-made clothes and shoes. Among South Korea's export destinations, Cambodia ranks 60th in terms of volume, but it has great potential because of its young population and its average economic growth rate in the last decade of 7%. Among the ASEAN countries, South Korea also has FTAs with Singapore, Vietnam, and Indonesia. New data in South Korea show just how big the increase was last year in online shopping. According to Statistics Korea, the value of online shopping transactions last year rose 19% on year to a record high of more than 144 billion US dollars. The surge was led by food delivery, groceries, and home appliances, but there was a massive decline in cultural and leisure services, travel, and transportation. Purchases through mobile devices rose 24.5%, also to an all-time high of around $97 billion. Time now for an in-depth look at the market news this afternoon, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Jun-seok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, good to have you back on.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks on Wall Street were up overnight. Lots of factors, it would seem there, including stimulus, earnings, perhaps an end to the Reddit mania. Korean stocks higher today as well, though not quite at their session high. What's the story in the markets today?
Okay, well, starting with the U.S. market, for Monday and Tuesday, they rose about 3 to 4%. It's not fully back to the record-setting January levels, though NASDAQ is actually very close. It may be because of somewhat of a return to normality. There was a lot of disruption due to the so-called short squeeze last week, but GameStop stock price has been falling rapidly this week. It's about $60 per share right now. It's still higher than what it was in the beginning of the year, but still these short squeeze stocks, GameStop, AMC, those stocks have been dropping very quickly this week, and there's going to be an investigation on whether these short squeezes organized through internet is market manipulation and whether there has been sufficient supervision by the SEC. Now, European stock, Monday and Tuesday, it rose following the U.S. stocks. Asian stocks as well. Monday and Tuesday, they rose, but today, Hang Seng and Shanghai fell while Nikkei rose. That is attributed to the People's Bank of China draining some of the liquidity from the financial system. For Korean stocks, Kospi, it continued to rise this week. From Monday to today, it rose 5.2%. And there has been a large sell-off by institutions today, but it was countered by purchases by especially foreigners. So the stock Kospi rose. Kosdaq for the first 3 days of this week rose 4.5% as well.
Well, last month, Professor, Korea's foreign currency reserves fell for the first time in 10 months. They had been rising every month in the pandemic since last April. What's causing this decline in the FX reserves? Okay,
well, the foreign currency reserve was $442.7 billion, but it fell by 0.08% between December and January. So that's not really a big percentage. Now, that's attributed mostly due to a strengthening dollar. Korea's foreign currency reserves are not entirely in dollars, but they are reported in dollars. And because of the strengthening dollar, the other currencies in the currency reserves, the value of it in terms of dollar has fallen. If you look at the basic fundamentals, the trade surplus, the capital inflows, Korea's currency reserves are still on track to rise, but we should start to think about whether we need to keep on increasing the foreign reserves. We feel secure having larger reserves because, well, there's more of an insurance against currency crisis, but it's also money that could be used that is being stuck in a basement somewhere. So we should start thinking about what is the ideal level of reserves and whether we should continually just add to the reserves.
It'll be a very interesting question to consider. Thank you for that, Professor, and thank you for sharing your insights with us today. As always, we'll have to leave it there for now.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thank you for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time.